This is the memorial service for Ntsiki Sandi, together with Sicelo, his nephew. This service has been initiated by Ntsiki's friend, particularly those he was working with at Rhodes, and some from the community. The program is categorized into 8 sessions. One is the opening prayer, then it's followed by the family, followed by friends, followed by community, followed by the professionals, people at work, and so on. Then it's going to be a vote of thanks, benedictions, vote of thanks, sermon, benediction. That's how we are going to proceed. I think we're going to start with the prayer. I'm going to give over to Reverend Dr. Sox Leleki, who's going to preside over the religious part of the service. Dr. Sox, can I pass over to you?
Masi thandaze egameni loyise egameni lonyana egameni lomoya oyingcwele, amen. Nkosi sisondela kuwe nangalomzuzu, bulela Thixo wethu kuba amandla akho, bulela Nkosi inceba yakho engunaphakade, bulela Nkosi uba nguThixo wethu nangala maxesha obunzima, kuze Nkosi sibone uthando lwakho lusizanga. Ngoku ke Nkosi sizawungena kulo msebenzi, sondela kuwe njengoThixo wethu, bulela Nkosi izicelo zakho, fikelelise konke uzakwenza kule wethu xa sikhumbula izinto zenzileyo ngesicaka sakho, umntaka Sandi Thixo wethu kweli lizwe. Okela ke Nkosi ngomoya oyingcwele, sithi Nkosi sesenze konke thina kweli lizwe, udumo lube luzuko lolwakho. Siyawuvula ke lo msebenzi ngoku ngokusesikweni, egameni loyise nelonyana nelomoya oyingcwele.
Masibulele ke kumfunsuleleki. Ngoku ke sawungena kwisigaba sokuqala. We're going to allow ubonile umelwe intombi yakhe.
Molweni Tata, thank you to everyone who's here today. Tata did not say that I had anything that I would have to say, but I think that the most important thing is just basically to thank everyone who's here today, and also just to thank the fact that you were able to put this together. I have nothing else to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Setu. We understand that you had to represent your father at the last moment. Thank you for coming. We're now going to call on Urami, Mr. Konka, going to represent the Sicelo Sandi family and the community at the same time. Over to you, Ram.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to say to whoever is on this program, or on behalf of Sicelo Sandi, I must greet you in the name of our Lord and say, Chair, when I'm talking about Sicelo, I'm talking about Sicelo as a rugby player, one of the well-known rugby players in Grahamstown and in the Eastern Province at large. You know, as a Winter Rose Rugby Football Club, that is the club which Sicelo played for, there's a very important decision that we took as a club in 1972 when SEDU Southeastern District Rugby Union was established. We were still students at Nathaniel Nyaluza that time. but we adopted the principle of non-racialism. The principle that was saying we cannot play normal sport in an abnormal society. This is the sport that was being played by Sicelo. And Sicelo, as a center, which he played for a position that he played for Winter Rose and also for Southeastern District Rugby Union. He made great name for himself and also for his family. Because once you talk of Sandi, he was seen as a crash tackler. He was seen as a center who would ensure that their opponents, more especially his opponent, is being unsettled. Definitely, he cannot relax in the field of play because he would know that he's marking a crash tackler, a person would make sure that even if there's no gap, but he will always see himself through. Now, as a family, Sandi family, I think we feel very honored by given this opportunity, to talk about Sicelo at this platform. It is that legacy that Sicelo lived for that had a very important input in ensuring that a democratic South Africa is being reached because of that played for. We were able to ensure that the South African community then is being isolated as far as sport is concerned internationally. And it is when the apartheid era, the apartheid regime felt that sport that is being paid by these people, it's not just an ordinary sport. It's a sport that ensures that the struggle carries on. I want to say to you, Chair, and the community at large, we thank you. We thank Sicelo first for ensuring that he has played a very important role in entertaining the community. Because sport is part of social entertainment, and also sport is part of social cohesion, of which it's what he did for the community. We want to thank him and also his family by allowing him to participate in the sport to ensure that at least the community is being entertained by the mere fact that the sport was being played in Makhanda. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Rami. Bob Mkondwano was going to speak on behalf of friends, has just indicated now that he's got a family problem. He's got to rush to the hospital, and so he's not available. We're going to push and go to the community representatives. That is Steve Hart, former mayor of Grahamstown and the leader of a business delegation during the period of consumer boycotts and so on in Ntsiki during that time. And after him is going to be Nomkita. They work together at Masifunde. Can we then invite Steve to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everybody who was involved in putting this memorial service together. I'm very pleased to be able to be here. Ntsiki and I met in the mid-80s when Grahamstown, as you said, Mr. Chair, was going through a spell of consumer boycott, which had been organized by the Grahamstown Civic Action Group. I just happened to be president of the Chamber of Business that year. So when Graka refused to talk to when Graka refused to talk to anyone other than the business leaders, I ended up in the middle of these talks. In our negotiations, the Chamber found itself frustrated by decisions being taken in meetings and with the Graka executive, and then those decisions being basically reversed as soon as the meeting was adjourned. This didn't create an environment of trust between the two organizations, and the way forward was unclear and looked quite bumpy. Somehow, after one of our meetings, I made contact with Ntsiki, and the two of us got talking, and we discovered that we had similar ideas about how to deal with the problem of going forward. The Daily Dispatch published an obituary on the 22nd of July, and one of the people quoted was Johan Vroneman, the retired Constitutional Court judge. He said of Ntsiki, he treated all of us, no matter our race or language, with friendliness, good humor, and a passion for our common future. This was the man I met and fondly remember. He was not interested in scoring petty political points. He just wanted what was best for his people. He wanted justice. It was a pleasure working with a man who had integrity and principles, who saw the bigger picture, and who cared more for the well-being of his fellow man than for himself. He was a remarkable man. I believe we were drawn together at an opportune time, and I will remember Ntsiki with a great deal of affection. I thank God that I was able to meet him and learn from him and share a bit of his life with him. God bless his soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And GRACA stands for Grahamstown Civic Association.
Yeah. GRACA.
And Ntsiki was the publicity secretary. Thanks, Steve. Can you come to Nomkita?
Director of Program, Comrade Pila, and Comrade Shepi, the Sandi and Luana families, the co-presenters, comrades and friends. I greet you all in the name of Jesus Christ this afternoon. Like Steve, I feel privileged to talk about this giant, very short giant, but in terms of ideas and thinking, very tall. I first met Ntsiki in 1982 when the idea of Masifunde came up. Are we still together?
Yeah.
When I see Lindile taking the screen. When the idea of Masifunde came up, apparently this idea came from Ntsiki and Bab Mkontwana. They were having a snack in front of the Paula's Bakery in New Street, half a loaf of brown bread and 250 mils of milk sharing as their lunch. It crossed their minds that, look, there's a high rate of illiteracy in Grahamstown. And secondly, most students, when they pass matric, they depend only to go to Forte. And as rules, it didn't allow then, it was not allowed to have Black students. Not unless you would go get a permit from Minister of Intelligence, you have to be subjected to various questions. And then they said, we need to mobilize bursaries. We need to have ABET. In as much as that time there was literacy classes at the primary schools in the township. But the content of the literacy classes was not satisfactory. Adults will be taught what is taught in sub A, standard 1, standard 2. And ABET was providing life skills and also political consciousness, that people were able to understand why they have found themselves in this situation. The idea of Masifunde was sold to Ntsiki's big brother, Dan, who happened at that time was with Zingisa. And the same model of Zingisa was replicated with Masifunde with a bit of twist there and there. For example, it was very difficult for people from Grahamstown to separate Masifunde from Graka, because the same board members of Masifunde were the board members of Graka. As a result, they saw one and the same thing. Program director, allow me to say something, things that we take for granted. In the first board,
as a friend, okay.
Guy, switch off the mic here.
Oh, sorry.
Interrupted.
Sorry. And then my friendship with Ntsiki emerged from that time when we were at Masifunde, and also as a colleague that I was working with. And Graka had an arm of gender, which was called Grahamstown Women's Organization. And in the board of Masifunde, out of the men that were there were also 2 women, including myself. And to me, that shows me that gender sensitivity has always been there within our people. I don't know where we lost it. But the long and short of it, his big brother then pushed Masifunde. Ntsiki by that time was at Rhodes. He would divide his time between serving Masifunde and also studying at Rhodes. A program director, one thing we learned at that time is the love between the 2 brothers, how they treated each other. Ntsiki was at Rhodes due to sacrifices that were made by Dan, reminding us of the olden days where our forebearers would sell every cow to ensure that the firstborn gets the education. And Dan did just that. He went as far as buying him a small scooter bike, which Ntsiki would drive from Rhodes to the township, to all the meetings. I still remember when he would visit me at home, my mother would moan and say, you know, the moment you see these Sandi brothers, you must know there's going to be problem. There are going to be police. I'm tired of police at my house. Which means they were associated with activism. The whole family was very active. Educating Ntsiki by then opened doors to all other Sandis. They were the role models of the Grahamstown community. They've got judges, they've got lawyers, they've got professors. I mean, people from ordinary background. We want to thank you, Skali, for sacrificing everything and ensure that your brother gets educated. The other thing that Ntsiki was known of as a lawyer was to help people, including myself. I'm always having some problems. I would just go there, even if I know he's an advocate, and he will say, you're at the wrong office, but I advise you to do A, B, C, D. Don't go around mentioning me. And if he says, do A, B, C, D, if he sees me coming in at the door, he will say, what now? What problem do you have? While you're going out, you'll meet another person coming in from the township. At the door, is Ntsiki there? Hey, I need him to help me with this and this and this. That is the Ntsiki I know. He died at the time when he didn't stop there. He went back to Masifunde, left for some time, and he went back to Masifunde, always in the forefront of community development. Funerals, you will see him. A very close friend to Umamu Plagi, the friendship that dates back to the days of Grao. Program director, before I finish, I want in absentia to ask you to talk with the comrades who are already in front there. I'm thinking of the young people who died during the height of struggle. People like Ospio Mazwai, or Boy no Nombiba, or Makwengwe Mpande, who were shot and killed by police because they were fighting for the South Africa that we wanted. And we were promised by you, comrades, leadership like Opila, that people shall govern. I wonder how many people are governing now. They must, Ntsiki must tell them that things are bad. When you arrive at Makana, you'll be shocked by the first thing that you need to invest in water tanks, because most of the time there's no water. And over and above that, if you use you flush, you've got to buy the machinery to ensure that you pump into the house. Meanwhile, you pay rates. That is the situation in Makana. Talk about all the service delivery related issues. When you talk there, ensure that you don't leave Umama Unomretes. Umama Plato died knowing the situation in Grahamstown. Tell them that you are still suffering. Things are getting from bad to worse every day. As a ratepayer, you've got to pop an extra money every month so that you have water, you have electricity. It's a plight that is facing the entire country. Umama Plato, tell her that the wishes that she had before she died, the only thing that worried her more than anything was the rate of gender-based violence in this town. And when she talked about roads, she said, we are failing with the girls who are at roads. As the community, as the mothers, as the fathers, we don't stand up. We need to stand up and establish what is happening at roads. In the olden days, we would have stopped that is happening at roads. Program Director, thank you for the time. And I wish Ntsiki's soul to rest in peace. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Kita. Upap, as I said earlier, who was going to stand in for the friends of Ntsiki, has apologized. Somebody in the family has been taken to hospital, is attending to that. In his place, we are going to ask Comrade Lindy Lejela to come in. He's also a very close friend of Ntsiki. Lindy, can you come in, please?
Oh, thanks, Program Director and fellow participants in this memorial service. We grew up together with Ntsiki, simazi engxakini njengontise. At too early a stage, he was an exemplary kid. In fact, bebonke phaa emaqoqweni kwaSandi babe ngabantu abayimizekelo emihle kulutsha lasengxakini, and we were very proud of them. We knew them as people who spoke the Queen's language very well, because they read books and they were known as abantu ngesiXhosa abaquzayo, people who could speak good English. And Ntsiki was amongst them. And as we grew older, we continued to study, but we recognized him as our role model. It was not only him, we recognized Dan, Prof. Sandi as our role model. We recognized Judge Sicelo Sandi, all of them growing up again near Victoria Road as our role models. So today, I feel honored to share the little I know about him. And although he was better qualified than most of us, but whenever he met someone who grew up again with, he will spend time to chat and to try and find out what you were doing in life and to find ways in which he could be of assistance. We were once again involved together in the formation of Masifunde and a twin organization of Masifunde, IGRACA, the Grahamstown Civic Association. All of us were involved, and as we continued to be involved, there were good times when we had councillors like Uba Umvuka, who was part of Onomgogwana, and he would say, ezintwana zakwaSandi zasemaqoqweni zilala ngezisu zikhomba nqane nemithetho karhulumente. Urhulumente akayifuni loo nto. Masibone kuthi thina nangona zisithi singonomgogwana kodwa thina siphiwe uphatha. Asibe si-questiona imithetho karhulumente. Zicimba zawube zimoyise norhulumente. But today we stand up as free people because Ntsiki and others, we continued to struggle. The vision was not clear at the end of the tunnel, but we knew that one day we would be free. So as a tribute to Ntsiki, sitilala kahle, young soldier. Siyabulela, program director.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very clear you know him because we just pounce on you. Yeah, you look like we are very prepared. Now we move on. Thanks, Lyndon. We move on. We're going to get into the messages of support. It's Professor Mabizela and Professor, followed by Professor Lungisile Nsabeza. Can we invite the VC to come forward?
Program Director, Lusapho Zihlobone Zalaman Advocate Ntsiki, comrades and friends, on behalf of our council and the entire Rhodes University community, I offer our heartfelt condolences and sympathies on the sudden and unexpected passing of Advocate Ntsiki. The Rhodes University community shares your grief and sorrow at the passing of our dear brother and an alumnus of our university. Our former Vice Chancellor, Dr. Salim Badat, asked me to convey his own condolences to the Sandi family on the tragic death of Advocate Ntsiki. I wish to thank the organizers of this memorial service for the opportunity to pay tribute to Advocate Ntsiki. My first encounter with Advocate Ntsiki goes back to a little more than a decade ago. In that first meeting, we discovered that our paths had crossed at the University of Fort Hare in the early 80s. We spent time reminiscing about those tumultuous years of the brutality of the Sebe police and army and how he abandoned his studies at the University of Fort Hare. I experienced firsthand his warmth and care in that first encounter with him. It was a truly joyous meeting. After that, I had many more interactions with Advocate Ntsiki over the years to discuss this and that about our city and about our community. Ntsiki lived a life of unwavering devotion and commitment to justice, fairness, and the pursuit of human dignity for the downtrodden. He lived a life dedicated to the betterment of our community and beyond. I always admired his generosity of spirit and his passion for ordinary people of Makhanda. In him, I saw someone who derived much fulfillment and satisfaction in helping others. He was a fighter for the underdog, a fearless and dedicated advocate for the vulnerable. Ntsiki was never removed from the daily travails and struggles of ordinary people of Makhanda. In interactions with him and in interactions with the local community, one always hears people say, "Dicele Ntsiki andenzele oku nokuya." Locals always say, "I asked Ntsiki to do this or that for me." There was no shortage of thoughtful advice and wise counsel from Ntsiki. Indeed, he was an extraordinarily generous person, a man of the people, firmly and unequivocally grounded in the community of Makhanda. He was a true servant of the people. From time to time, we would discuss the sorry state of our city and the challenges of service delivery. He, like many of us, bemoaned the deterioration of the infrastructure, but he was never without hope. We always agreed on the need for all of us to put our shoulder on the wheel to turn things around. Notwithstanding the challenges we face, he always held a positive outlook to life. And he always exuded boundless energy and irrepressible passion and dynamism when engaging in current political affairs. And indeed, he was always a force for good. To the Sandi family, I wish to offer our collective gratitude and sincere appreciation to you for so freely and so generously sharing Ntsiki with all of us. Thank you for your love and support for him. That he was able to extend himself as much as he did was in no small measure creditable to you. It was in his personal and family sacrifices of the comforts and the trappings of material benefits associated with professionals of his class, stature, and standing, that he was able to touch lives of others in a very special way. Ntsiki's departure of the land of the living has robbed us and humankind of an inspirational leader and a role model for the youth of our city. Our country needs more people like Ntsiki who care very deeply about the welfare of the less fortunate among us. We honor him and celebrate a life dedicated to the service of others. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Chair.
Well, we're thanking the Professor for his input, and now we're going to ask Professor Ntsebeza to follow up.
Ngosi Qabane, molweni ngalemva kwethu. My name is Lungisile Ntsebeza, and I see on the program that I'm cited as a person who was a member of Masifundise. I'm here now representing the Trust for Community Outreach and Education, and with the acronym TCOE. The late Advocate Sicelo Sandi, popularly known as Ntsiki, served on the board of trustees of Masifunde for over 20 years. Masifunde was an affiliate of the Trust for Community Outreach and Education, TCOE. It is thus as a result of this association that I, on behalf of TCOE, pay this tribute to Ntsiki. I am the chairperson of TCOE. Ntsiki was an extremely humble man, a gentle soul with a sharp intellect and insights. He was, as the VC has said, in many ways a man of the people who demonstrated deep commitment to the cause of poor communities. As a trustee of Masifunde, Ntsiki attended countless community meetings, dialogues, and he listened intently to the challenges residents faced in townships, in informal settlements, and rural villages where Masifunde operated. He was particularly interested in issues of land and rural governance. Of course, now this is where I would spend time now with Ntsiki talking about these issues, because my own field of expertise is land and governance. And in this regard, he would quietly but firmly encourage staff at Masifunde to campaign for the restoration of land to its rightful owners. In recent years, Ntsiki, like most of us, was very disgruntled by greedy politicians who masqueraded as comrades, and he was not shy to raise his voice and to use the power of his pen against rampant corruption, especially in local government. We will miss Ntsiki, but he leaves behind his insights, which are indelible and will continue to inspire us as we pursue the noble cause of the achievement of a truly egalitarian society that he himself stood for. Engos.
Let's thank the Professor Bobaitu. I think they've done very well. And they really reflected Ntsiki in the areas they have just mentioned. We're going to move on now and get Ntsiki as a professional person at work, social life with friends, colleagues, as an activist at that level. Professor Hendricks is going to, Fred is going to talk about Ntsiki as a student and an activist at the campus and how he knows him in the community as well. Thank you. We're going to ask you, Fred, to come in.
Thank you, Program Director. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'd like to start by thanking Pila Nkai and Shefi Marti for giving me this opportunity to pay my last respects to Ntsiki Sandi and to honor his memory. I was his lecturer at Rhodes University in the mid-1980s, and I'd like to share with you some of my recollections of him as a student and as an activist and later as a friend. Ntsiki arrived at Rhodes University as a first-year student in 1983, doing courses in politics, journalism and media studies, sociology, and legal theory. And he passed all of them in his first year, which was quite an unusual thing to accomplish then. When I arrived at Rhodes University in 1985 as a young lecturer, Ntsiki was in his third year already, being one of the very few students doing both General Sociology 3 and Industrial Sociology 3 as majors, together with legal theory. The context of our meeting was significant because 1985 was a revolutionary year in the entire country, but specifically in the Eastern Cape, where many areas were declared completely liberated zones. Rhodes was not untouched by this sweep of activism across the country. And I was immediately struck by Ntsiki's calm, resolute commitment. He was not one for slogans and rabble-rousing. Instead, he was looking to accomplish deep-seated analyses of our condition in order to contribute to lasting solutions to our many seemingly intractable problems. In today's political language, Ntsiki was never a populist. Instead, he tried to utilize his sociological and historical knowledge to propagate the struggle against apartheid. And his commitment in this regard was unwavering. Ntsiki's academic results were modest, but this was no indication at all of his ready intelligence, as his time at university was marred by protracted states of emergency, and he was the victim of lengthy periods of detention without trial during these periods of intense state repression. Hence, at university, he was granted agrotats, which are special examinations for students who have good reasons for not being present at the exams. And he had very good reasons, because he was in jail at the time. I especially enjoyed his mild-mannered articulation of problems when others were more prone to empty rhetoric. And I recall his contribution to class tutorials, where he stood out as an articulate champion of human rights, way ahead of his time. His enjoyment of the English language was palpable, and he could employ his extraordinarily wide vocabulary to mount compelling, often unassailable arguments. So when his classmates were often very superficial in their approach, Ntsiki exuded a captivating depth. He always looked well into the future, even as an undergraduate student. I recall his wide reading of international events, as he kept abreast of global currents to enrich his appreciation of local dynamics. But through all of this, Ntsiki could also see the lighter side of things and of life in general. He had a wicked sense of humor and a charming and endearing personality to match. He was not only a student, of course, he was a very deeply committed community and political activist. So at the time that he was a student, he was also very involved in the work of the Grahamstown Civic Association, which he founded together with Dan and David Sandi, as well as Pila Nkai and Babs Nkontwana. He was GRACA's publicity secretary, as our program director has mentioned, and it's largely his work with the Civic that attracted the attention of the security police at the time. Besides the Grahamstown Civic Association, GRACA, and the UDF in Grahamstown, Ntsiki was also a staunch member of the Young Christian Workers, the YCW, which was at the heart of many campaigns as part of the general push for national liberation. Importantly, at a local level, he was also co-founder of Masifunde, together again with Dan Sandi, as well as Lindile Jela, Nomkita Geisman, and Douglas Rowentela, which lasted until 2 years ago, with Ntsiki as a board member. It's a great pity that despite Ntsiki's sterling efforts at ensuring its sustainability over 2 decades, Masifunde has unfortunately folded. The other aspect of Ntsiki's life that I would like to just touch on, because I know that it will be covered in much greater depth by Advocate Ntsiki Sandi. It's his role as a member of the TRC's Amnesty Committee. Because in struggle, Ntsiki lived by the famous Amilcar Cabral dictum, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. And so there is some poignancy in his being appointed by President Nelson Mandela to the Amnesty Committee of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. His commitment to telling no lies, to telling the truth, finally started to pay off in democratic South Africa. I would just like to point out something about the manner in which his involvement in the Amnesty Committee demonstrated his own humanity, his own empathy, and how that shone through as he led evidence, for example, in the human rights violation hearing in the case of Bully Cole from Grahamstown, Makanda, who was shot by the security police after attending the funeral in Joza of Shweshwe Matiwane, who was killed the week before. She was a junior primary school pupil from Silvertown, and she was shot through the window of their house. What disgusted Ntsiki very much as he led this evidence was the celebratory mood of the police at the station after they'd killed Bully. Robert Cole, Bully's father, gave evidence, as well as Tyrone Austin, who was with Bully when he was shot, and chillingly was told by the security policeman that they'd actually aimed for him, but shot Bully by mistake. This was the level of impunity that the police enjoyed under apartheid. The hearings were held in East London, chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, but there was something touchingly appropriate that Ntsiki should be leading the evidence in investigating the human rights violations that occurred in Grahamstown, Makanda, his own hometown. Ntsiki also tried his hand as a journalist, and he wrote countless pieces in the Daily Dispatch, all of which I have read. And they again exude his wide reading of events with a global perspective. But most of all, they served to demonstrate his deep commitment to resolving the structural problems of racialized inequality in South Africa, whether it concerned questions of corruption and cronyism, or the enduring disparities in access to and ownership of land. He managed to merge the necessity for reconciliation in South Africa with his abiding concern for social justice, which in the first instance was what led him to pursue a career in the legal profession. Ntsiki, on a lighter side, I must also say that Ntsiki was also something of a raconteur. And so he was a man of many parts. And I would often meet him at the Cockhouse on a Friday evening, where together with his friends Jiga and Sunil, who he met at Students' Roads as well, he would be sharing a few drinks after a week of hard work in the legal field. Ntsiki would regale us with his encounters with injustice and the many problems of developing a normative framework which respects the rule of law. He had a knack of seeing the funny side of the many contradictions in our condition, and he used these to create a kind of concerned humor. He was never disparaging, but he could make us laugh with his cutting witticisms and his insightful observations, because they were so often close to the bone, so true. His stories resonated with all of us because they spoke a certain truth, even if they were light-hearted and humorous. Ntsiki lived a full life, but he has been taken far too early, and he will be missed by many as he leaves a gaping hole in the legal, family, friendship, and community circles. He has enriched all of our lives as we interacted with him, and I offer my heartfelt condolences. Hambagahle Ntsiki. Thank you very much.
That was Ntsiki, as seen by the eye of Professor Fred Hendricks. A true reflection of the indeed. Now we're going to call on Yani, a son of Makanda, Ntsiki's friend, comrade, and a colleague. Can you come in, Yani? Yani Coltman is also an advocate. They are in the same court chambers with Ntsiki.
Yes, I've known Ntsiki for a number of years. Obviously, when he worked at Lawyers for Human Rights, I was working at Legal Resources Center at the time too. So, but we never, I beg your pardon? Sorry, there's an echo. So we never, but we never really had any regular interactions at the time. We started to get to know each other when I joined the Director of Public Prosecutions, and he was at the bar at the time. And I want to link up with what had been said by Professor Hendricks, and and I'm sure everybody else will concur with what had been said. Is the one thing that stood out with Ntsiki was his very humorous nature, and Ashley will also confirm and agree that even if you're in a case with Ntsiki, you'd always be on the verge of bursting out in laughter because of the funny way and humorous way he would always explain anything, make submissions, conducting his case. I, at some point in time, also practiced as an attorney and also had the privilege to instruct him to do matters for clients. And I can say without any doubt that he would, in all of those cases, he would give his heart and put in everything and fight until the bitter end to bring success for his clients. And that is sometimes one of the most difficult things for legal practitioners when you become too subjectively involved in matters and feel very disheartened and disappointed afterwards. But we became closer when I joined the bar in 2015. And Ntsiki was obviously there were many other colleagues at the bar that I could speak to, but I could best relate to Ntsiki because firstly I knew him better than everybody else that I'd known at the bar at the time, and I would sometimes also join him and Sunil and Gerald at the cookhouse, but not very often on Fridays. But it was always a very joyful event too. But what for me will stand out is how he assisted me at the time when I had joined the bar, because joining the Grahamstown bar for any black advocate, and I'm sure all the other blacks there would tell you, including Ashley will probably also confirm what I'm saying, is a most difficult thing because you're in a tiny minority in that building. And I remember, because it was at the same time when Gerald had also left, exited, and after being permanently appointed as a judge. And I remember that all of us were at the bottom floor, you know, the ground floor, as you enter the St. George's chambers. And I had serious discussions with him and others about that. And I pointed out to him because later on I bought a judge, a former deputy judge, not judge, president, chief justice of the Constitutional Court, Judge Dikgang Moseneke's book titled I Am My Own Liberator. And Ntsiki borrowed that book from me and we exchanged. In fact, he gave me a book on Steve Biko as well, because I find it, I'm sometimes very disappointed that we don't read very often nowadays on what Steve Biko and them had said those years ago about our own emancipation, mental emancipation too. And Judge Dikgang Moseneke speaks about that. And it is so important for me that, that Judge Dikgang Moseneke had stressed the fact that you are your own liberator. I am my own liberator. And I'd explained to him that the fact that we're sitting here at the ground floor with everybody else, and the whites, and the first floor, etc., on top of us, just physically shows what we're allowing in our societies and in our legal fraternity. We are our own oppressors. We allow ourselves to be oppressed. And it is for that reason that I'd said to him that I will not stay on this floor forever, and I had to move out because otherwise I'm oppressing myself. So we had very serious discussions about this and how you transform the bar and how you can transform the legal fraternity and how the judiciary should be transformed. And he was on the Bar Council, the Grahamstown Bar Council as well. I beg your pardon, the Eastern Cape Society of Advocates, yes. And he made tremendous inputs on how the legal fraternity should be transformed and how younger Black advocates should be assisted in with their practices. So to suddenly hear that somebody that had been so close with you over such a long period of time, a comrade, without any notice, came as a very huge shock to me. And I remember that one young female colleague, Black colleague at at the bar, said that she doesn't know, she wouldn't know how she would be able to make it without hearing his humorous jokes and voice again. So I joined Professor Hendricks and everybody else in saying, Amba Kashle, comrade Amba Kashle Ntsiki, and please my family and friends accept my condolences as well as all my colleagues at the bar's condolences. Thank you.
Thanks, Yanni. You didn't say anything about the round bar. Not very much about the round bar. We're expecting to hear that. Okay, maybe Ashley is going to come in and say that. Ashley, can we invite you, please?
Thank you, Pila. Thank you, program directors, for this opportunity. Ntsiki was, to the family, the Sandi family, I want to convey the deepest condolences of myself, my wife, and my fellow comrades and colleagues. Ntsiki was very close to all of us. You know, we had many of us individual moments with him, where we, were just overcome with laughter. He had the most funny way of seeing things and the funniest way of conveying things in a dry, unassuming manner. That all of us who worked closely with him are going to miss. I meet some of my colleagues and we talk, and they say, I still expect him to come around the corner with his gown on. I still expect him, to speak up, to hear his voice in the corridors. I can still not fathom and come to grips with the fact that our friend and our comrade is gone. So amongst the Black practitioners in Grahamstown, he is going to be missed. And I spoke to some of my colleagues from some of the other towns, East London, PE, Mthatha, that briefed him on an ongoing basis, and they themselves are finding it difficult to work through the shock of his sudden demise. Now, Ntsiki was, a unique person. I think all of us can attest to that. Whilst he was brilliant on the one hand, at the same time, he was also the most humble of people. He was the kind of person that can be the friend of a prince and the friend of a pauper, because that is the nature of the person that he was. He could make himself comfortable. He could move in all of those circles, and he was just a special. He was just a special person. I did not always see eye to eye with Zikali. I must admit that. Quite often we did matters together, and he wanted to go one way and I wanted to go another way. And what I think quite often happened was that he had the ability to see over the hill. He saw what was coming, much earlier than I saw. Whilst I was still in the fighting mood, to go and win this matter, he saw that the matter is probably, the cause is lost. And it's just a matter of time before the result becomes inevitable. So it was just that, brilliant kind of a person. Ntsiki, Gerald Bloom, and Sunil Rugunanan and I all come from the school of, or the University of Sicelo Sandi. All of us, worked there for some stage of our lives. And as much as Budbomba was had an OCD personality, it rubbed off on all of us. We still bang our bundles of papers together, and we still laugh, about that. So, we had a special kinship coming from that office. Ntsiki was not only an idealist, of seeing what our country should be, but he tried to make that practical. Quite often people who had a very, modest means, people that are poor, that needed help. And I think Sis Nomgita, spoke about that. People that did not have the money to go to attorneys or counsel or advocates, when they needed help, Ntsiki would be there for them. He would take on cases because he believed it was right that their rights are articulated, and not because they had money. Quite often, we think, and I must say I'm one of them, we look at a client and we say, can I make money out of this particular matter? And if I cannot make money, maybe it's better if the client gets referred to legal aid or to some other public interest law institution, because we're thinking about the overheads. Ntsiki was not like that. He looked at the matter. He looked at the the importance of that matter to this person, and he tried to, in a very practical way, realize the dream that he has and the vision that he has of South Africa for his indigent clients. I often would phone Ntsiki, and it speaks to his commitment. It would be 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning. I would phone him and he would be half asleep. And I would say to him, Zikali, you, usasabtongwen. And he would say, no, I left, I was working the whole night. I left at about 5 o'clock and I just got a few hours of sleep and I'm just waking up now. You are waking me now, and I would apologize. But that was the level of commitment that Uzikali had for, his matters. The Bible says that a prophet is not always respected in his country, and so it was with Uzikali as well. Quite often he would speak about the fact that at the bar, as Yanni had mentioned, there is a lot of inequality. That the way that things used to be done many years ago are still being done, and he would be frustrated at the fact that he could not change the bar, especially the Grahamstown bar, for the better. So through everything, I think to an extent he was not recognized for the brilliant genius that he was. Zikali was also frustrated, quite often at the direction of the country. I think Prof. Hendricks mentioned the articles that he wrote in the Dispatch. He was larger than life. He was a very moral person, and he would take positions based on his view of morality and his view of the Constitution, as opposed to what is expedient in the circumstances of a specific matter. And I think quite often, because he spoke out about certain things, he may not have received the level of support from government that he was that he would otherwise have received had he not articulated some of the views. And if you were to speak to Zikali about something, said, "Hey, Zikali, that article of yours was, maybe a bit harsh," then he would just, wave it off, say, "Mwah," and continue to push his point, being very dismissive, of criticism, and being true to, what is good, what is right, and what is proper, in a specific situation. All of us would remember Zikali for the stories that he told. I think it was Prof. Hendricks who also mentioned that he would regale us with his stories, and he was very good at mimicking people, of speaking, with the voice and the mannerisms of the speaker. So he had a tremendous ability to remember and to bring to life, people. And we really enjoyed that side of Zikali. So in conclusion, Zikali was a singularly special person. He touched my life. He touched a lot of other people's lives. we all looked up to him, as the black professionals in Grahamstown, as attorneys, as advocates. Zikali became like a big brother to all of us. He will not be missed. He is missed. It is not something that is going to come each and every day. We will feel a little bit less pain at his absence, but my life is richer because I knew him, because I had him as my friend, because he was my colleague and my comrade in this struggle that we have to create this country that we want to see for all of us. His spear has fallen. It's up to us to pick up that spear and to push on forward. Go well, Zikali. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you, Ash. Mouthful. It's good you came in this late. You see, because it looks like you're prepared for all the time. Thanks, Ash. We can now invite Pupu Tumis, Advocate Zabeza. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. I think in the way that I usually say these things when I am speaking at the tail end of any program, a lot and much has been said about Ntsiki, and it leaves very little for me to say anything. I can only endorse what the sentiments that have been expressed. Perhaps let me start where my shock came when I heard about the news of the demise of Ntsiki. It was Judge Bloom, Gerald Bloom, who phoned me, and he phoned me at a time when I was getting a lot of telephone calls from a number of people who were commiserating with me and expressing loads of condolences at the loss of my son on the 23rd of June, who died fairly untimely. So when he phoned to tell me about Ntsiki, I had thought that he is one of those who were saying, at the time that the news broke about the death of your son, and at the time that we got to know, because we were party to a Zoom funeral in early July, we didn't want to phone you because we thought that a number of people were doing the same thing. So I had thought that that is the basis on which Judge Bloom was phoning me. And, but then he says, you have heard, Mos. And these days, I tell you, when a person says, you have heard, then you must brace yourself to hear the worst that you thought was not possible. So when I said, when he asked, have you heard, Mos? I said, have I heard what? And he said, Ntsiki. And then I said, you are not going to tell me what I think you want to tell me, given the context of what I have been getting from people. And Jerry says, Ntsiki is no more. And I got the shock of my life. And I'll tell you why. It was because only a week or a fortnight there before that time, we were engaged with Ntsiki in a matter I am going to talk more about shortly. But before I do that, let me go back to where I first met Ntsiki. I first met him because in the TRC, because we were members, both members of a committee, the Human Rights Violations Committee, where he first served, where the chairman was Desmond Tutu, and the deputy was Yasmin Suka, and Ntsiki and I were members of that committee. And that was the committee that was busy with the investigations of gross human rights violations in the mandate period from 1960 to 1994, the 34 years of South African history. Now there will be a day when I have to explain why it was those 34 years that were being inquired into by the Truth Commission. But we met in that committee with Ntsiki. One of the things that struck me about him was the fact this guy, he was a deep thinker. Somebody said that. But he was so self-effacing, you know, soft-spoken, always with a smile. You know, that kind of a person who came across as somebody who has weighed each and every word that he was going to utter to make sure that when it sank, it carried the meaning that he wanted you to get. So I was not surprised when, after the time of the Truth and Reconciliation came to an end, and you will know that the mandate period was from 1996 to 1998, 2 years. In fact, it was supposed to be 18 months, and then we had the right to ask for an additional 6 months in terms of the legislation, which we did. But at the end of that period, because of the way in which he distinguished himself in the Human Rights Violations Committee, when the work of the Amnesty Committee had to continue, because a number of people had applied for amnesty, and in some cases, you know, where it was amnesty for perpetrators asking for amnesty for gross violations of human rights, killings, abductions, torture, and, you know, and severe ill treatment. Those amnesty applications took quite some time. One of them, in fact, was the PEP Code 3 application for amnesty by Bo Nivot and others. We all know, coming from the Eastern Cape, what the, you know, the demise of the people who were known as the PEP Code 3, of Kakauli, Godoloze, and Tatwashe. Now, that is one of the applications that came before Ntsiki. And if I'm not mistaken, he penned the decision of the Amnesty Committee, and he denied amnesty to those who are applying for amnesty on the basis that, you know, amongst other things, they had not disclosed the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth. Because of all the criteria that entitled anyone to amnesty, one of the most important, you know, criteria was whether or not the perpetrator seeking the grant of amnesty to him or her had made a full disclosure of the facts in relation to which he wanted to be granted amnesty. And those police people who were responsible for the murder of the PEP Code 3 took the decision of the Amnesty Committee on review. And it was in that sense, because I was, you know, briefed by the Department of Justice to represent the Department of Justice in the review application by those perpetrators. And but it's a long story, but the long and short of it is that I went back to Ntsiki and we discussed at length, the pitfalls that were in the application for the review of their finding. And Ntsiki was very helpful to me in letting me understand the thinking of that committee when they refused amnesty. But that thing went nowhere because it was frustrated by the state attorney, an Afrikaner, who never filed the papers that we had crafted. But then that's a debate for another day. So we are dealing here with a person who was not only a person committed to accountability, but he was committed to access to justice, as some of the speakers have indicated. And therefore, when in 2013, I was invited to go and speak about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission at a Congress of Brazilian history scholars. And I couldn't go because I was committed elsewhere. The very first person that I thought of who would have been an appropriate substitute for me was Ntsiki. And I called on Ntsiki. And I said, Ntsiki, I've been invited to go and talk to this Congress in Brazil of history scholars. And I think you will be a wonderful person to go and represent me there, because they can't postpone the event, but at the same time, they do want people who might give a view of what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's place is in the history of South Africa, to a point where they think they could draw lessons that would influence their handling of their own atrocities in Brazil, in Argentina, and Chile. So Ntsiki, without thinking twice, took it upon himself, and he made himself available. So he left his practice for the time that it was going to take him. I think he was going to be away for a week. And, I said, Ntsiki, you don't even have to pay out of your pocket. Hey, it's okay. And off he went. And I got responses from these people telling me about the caliber of the man that Ntsiki is, or he was. But just to go back to what I was saying about the shock that I got when I got the sad news from Gerald. I told Gerald that what shocks me is that just recently, fairly recently, to the day that he was phoning me to tell me about Ntsiki's demise, I told Gerald, I said, it's very ironical and it's very, and I can't believe that you are talking, we are going to be talking about Ntsiki in the past, because I am still reeling from the skill that he displayed in an answering affidavit that he had crafted for me. And again, one of those things, I just phoned Ntsiki and said, Ntsiki, I don't know if this guy, who wants representation but does not have the requisite funds, ulungile mxube. And then he says, you know, hey, Budum, hey man, hey Budum, hey man, how can I do these things, man? How can I can't afford to do things pro bono, but hey, he must come to do. I must see to what extent I can help him. So I said to Gerald, you will remember that there was an application that was brought by an MEC against Holomisa in one instance and against Mkube in one instance because of postings that they had allegedly made, in Twitter and everywhere else, and which the MEC concerned had found to be defamatory and had to be and had sued these individuals for defamation and had actually asked for, in application form, for the court to grant the relief of a damage, which would sound in money, which the people must pay them. Now, Ntsiki sends me a draft answering affidavit. And I just want, because it was in such a simple language, but also so pregnant in meaning, pregnant with meaning, even for people who are not lawyers. He says about the MEC concerned, he says, the applicant is a seasoned politician, and he is no stranger to controversy and publicity in the media. As a public office bearer, she is entrusted with important state responsibilities and duties, which we should always bear in mind, which she should always bear in mind, wherever she goes and whatever she is doing. She should not be too thin-skinned, but should follow the example of other public office bearers who grudgingly tolerate criticism, however impolite it may be. This is the test of leadership. And then says, in the context of the statements, the statements are therefore not defamatory at all, viewed objectively and closely scrutinized by reasonable, rational, and intelligent readers who should understand and appreciate the problems of today. Generally, these were questions which I posed in public. I was requesting an answer by the applicant, her senior members, and her colleagues in government. From time to time, the applicant's name will be in public domain, sometimes for right reasons, but at other times for regrettable reasons. The applicant may have found the postings less than polite and embarrassing, but it cannot be said that they amounted to defamation. There is a world of a difference between defamation and being embarrassed about public appraisal of one's moral rectitude or perceived failure to deliver on one's public office. I am advised that over the years, the courts have sought to explain the difference between the two scenarios. A reasonable reader, considering the very specific context of each posting, which is explained below, would understand that my questions and statements were directed at the applicant and her senior officials in the department, all in their official capacities only. In matters that were being raised by members of the public to me, they were concerned about the reported happenings in the department. All my statements refer to the applicant in her capacity as the political head of the department. What public office bearers do in their jobs and wherever they go may sometimes be the legitimate concern and curiosity of the public. Sometimes even the press itself would probe into the private life of public office bearers. As a citizen and an anti-corruption activist, I was exercising my rights in terms of 16(1) of the Constitution that guarantees everyone the right to express one's views on any issues which is the concern of the public. I had a right to receive the information from my sources and share it with the public. There are obviously serious problems in the applicant's department, and public has a right to know and to be informed why the problems continue to exist. The applicant could have replied by issuing statements to the press and other forms of mass communication, or even through Twitter, as she did after the interim order was issued. I rest my case.
Yeah, Bro Dumza, you rested this case very early. But thanks. But thanks. From here, we're going to ask Dr. Sox Leleki to conclude everything from vote of thanks to to you, Reverend Dr. Sox.
Thank you, Program Director. Thank you for affording me this wonderful opportunity of first and foremost to pass a word of thanks and sincere gratitude to the presenters or speakers at this August gathering this afternoon, remembering our comrade. Also understanding the fact that you have taken your time in preparing for this well prepared, well thought of, and well presented speeches this afternoon. We want to say to all of you, we thank you for taking all the trouble of making this gathering this afternoon a success. We also want to thank those who have participated by being part of this memorial service this afternoon, and knowing for the fact that you've also sacrificed your time and be part of us this afternoon. On behalf of the organizers, we want to say thank you so much, and may God richly bless you. Also, let me also take this opportunity to thank the organizers for affording me this singular honor and rare privilege of participating by closing this memorial service this afternoon. All of us would agree and accept the fact that Advocate Ntsiki has touched our lives in one way or another. He was a people's person. We have journeyed with him in many, many areas of our lives. I would never forget him during the times of dark days in our struggle when we were in the trenches. He has played a very important role in leading and guiding us. Him, Comrade Pila, Comrade Dan, Comrade Kondwana, and many of them were a first layer of leadership during those times, and were raised to become the second layer of leadership and reflect on what Jesus was saying and what that means to us today. Jesus was about to leave this world, departing, understanding that he's leaving people behind. These are few words that he have shared with his disciples. And I want us just to reflect and put emphasis on the words that says, but take heart. That's what King's Version says in the Bible. But it simply means be strong, be resilient, Don't look back, forge forward. For I, as Jesus, have conquered the world. Preparing everybody to understand and know that we are given a short, limited time on this earth. So we should be able to ensure that we use that time profitably so that everything that is expected of us is done within that short space of time. Just like Advocate Ntsiki, who has run this race, knowing and conscious of the fact that he was given a limited time. And during that time, he has made his mark. All of us this afternoon were sharing exactly that he has done a wonderful work. As Jesus was leaving the disciples, it was a difficult moment for Jesus himself, knowing that he's going to leave these guys, living a life without him. But again, knowing that even if Jesus is not there, but Jesus was leaving his words with him, so that even if physically Jesus is not part of their lives, but Jesus' words will always continue to encourage them and make them to be strong and know that everything can still be done as if Jesus is part of their lives. Even at this difficult moment of us remembering the life lived by our comrade, Advocate Ntsiki, we should be able to take courage from the words of Jesus this afternoon. As Comrade Ntsiki is no longer physically with us, but we know that Jesus' words connect us with him from wherever he is, knowing for the fact that we should be able to take courage and be strong and move forward. As Jesus was leaving the disciples, he didn't leave them with wealth of this world. He didn't leave them with tenders of this world. He didn't leave them with corruption of this world. But Jesus was leaving them with a living word so that they'll be able to understand that Jesus continued to be part of their lives. And Comrade Ntsiki, as he's leaving us, he's leaving us exactly with words of Jesus, that we should be encouraged and continue to understand that we live with Jesus and we should live our lives in a way that benefits many people. As Ntsiki, Comrade Ntsiki has shared his life with many of us today as we reflect on his life. I want us to say, as we conclude this day, remember Jesus saying these words. For me is living three important words that we should always try and ensure that we are in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. The first word that Jesus is living with us is these three W's. The first one is wake up with Jesus. That every morning when we wake up, we should be able to wake up with Jesus. The first person that we should greet before we greet all other people is to greet Jesus and say, good morning, Jesus. Because we are waking up with Jesus. We're not waking alone. We wake up with Jesus. And we should be able to continue. As if we are waking up with Jesus, then we begin to ask Jesus to become the center of our life. As we continue to do our jobs and our chores day in and day out, we know that we are not alone because we wake up with Jesus and takes courage in knowing that Jesus is with us and be able to live and continue with Jesus. The second W that I want to live with us is walk with Jesus. As we walk day in and day out, doing our jobs and our work and everything that we are busy with in this world, we should be walking with Jesus. Because those who are walking with Jesus, they don't get tired. Those who are walking with Jesus, they make sure that they are in the footsteps of Jesus. They continue to try day in and day out to do what is expected of them and do right in the eyes of Jesus, because they know that they are not alone. They are walking with Jesus. And when even the enemies are drawing their swords against us, we don't get discouraged because we know that we are not alone. There are times when we don't even answer. We just say to Jesus, answer on our behalf, because Jesus is walking with us. We should be able to be walking with Jesus. And we can see that from Advocate Ntsiki's life, that he was not alone. He was walking with Jesus. All the achievements that we are talking about this afternoon is simply because he was walking with Jesus. The last W that I want to leave with us this afternoon is the one that says work with Jesus. In what kind of work we find ourselves in, we should not be working alone. We should be working with Jesus. And if we are working with Jesus, we're not going to find ourselves tempted to be part of corruption of this country, of this world, because every time we try to be part of corruption, Jesus would be able to speak to our conscience and says, this is not the right way of doing things. Even those who in power are not going to abuse power and authority, because they would understand that they are not working alone. Wherever they are working with Jesus. We should be able to work with Jesus day in and day out as we do our work, as we do our jobs, as we do our taking our shots and do everything, but knowing and understanding that we are not alone. We're doing it with Jesus, because it is always nice when we work with Jesus. At the end of the day, we're not that much worried about the great remuneration, because we know that Jesus himself is able to satisfy our hearts, is able to walk with us and able to help us even during difficult times, as we continue to remember what Advocate Ntsiki has done. Let's remember these words and take courage, knowing what Jesus said, I, Jesus, have conquered the world. We can conquer all those things that are making us to live and go astray and not do what is expected us as the children of God. May God continue to bless all of us as we continue to take the spear from Ntsiki and forge forward and continue with the struggle. May we all bow our heads and pray. Gracious, wonderful God, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for a life well spent of Advocate Ntsiki. Thank you for this testimony. May we all, those who have forgotten their purpose in life, and begin to come back and understand why we continue to be given opportunity to live on this world, because you call on us to be with you day in and day out, and continue to see you as an example of how we should live and guide our own lives. For those who are in power and authority, leading us in this country and in the world, please continue, God, to guide them. Even during this difficult time of coronavirus, we have you next to us, walking with us, guiding us, and helping us to go through. We ask all these things through the wonderful name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
Let me thank you, Reverend Dr. Sox, and I'm not going to thank everybody. I think my role now is to release everybody, wish everybody to go home and be safe from coronavirus. observe the protocols, health protocols against in the fight against the coronavirus. Farewell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
too.
you, brother.
Thank you, Bila.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.